All right, good morning, Chair Manning, Vice Chair Reynolds, Ranking Member Hicks-Hudson, and members of the committee. My name is Patrick Higgins, and I have the pleasure of serving as Senior Policy Counsel for the ACLU of Ohio. As over in the House, I have the pleasure of following Ms. Vollmer and experts from the Prison Fellowship giving their testimony in support of this bill, and it's a great honor to follow their lead in doing this work. So. I appreciate the opportunity to testify in support of House Bill 296, which we see as a straightforward approach to easing the often insurmountable burdens faced by our neighbors who are returning to our communities after reentry, those burdens that you just heard about that can stack up in folks' lives. So of the many folks who are in Ohio's prisons and those on traditional control, most of them are going to come home. We're looking at anywhere, usually north of 15,000 people, getting upwards close to 20,000 people on an annual basis. We know that when folks come home, that when we support them with intention, that their reentry does better. And so it's with that spirit in mind that I hope we have a shared value of supporting folks and making sure that that reentry happens successfully. So it's with that shared value that I hope we have in mind that we extend our gratitude to Representative Miller and the other co-sponsors on the bill for leading on this legislation and making the case for it so clearly. So, as Ohioans return to their communities after incarceration, they face, costly tasks, burdens, other things, getting out of prison, getting an ID, which we solved in previous legislation. All costly, especially in our places where folks don't have transportation, need to get to the places appointment after appointment. So I think it only makes sense that in these instances, we follow this path laid out in House Bill 296 so that folks don't have those debts necessarily forgiven, but move back so that we can focus on those immediate expenses that reduce recidivism and facilitate a successful reentry. So rather than keeping our neighbors trapped in cycles of poverty and punishment, we believe this legislation will give folks an opportunity they previously don't have or currently don't have. Now, it wouldn't be testimony in the Senate Judiciary Committee from the ACLU of Ohio without a suggestion of how you can make this bill stronger, which is something that I know is in the back of everyone's mind. So when we look at recidivism numbers, we know in Ohio and on a nationwide basis that successful reentry can take a lifetime. There's no one-size-fits-all approach, but we do know that successful reentry hinges on different dates, with a one-year timeline being the period of time in which recidivism happens, most frequently or most often. So it's with that in mind, I encourage you to consider changing the timeline to a one-year timeline rather than a 6-year timeline. I also noticed that there's a large insect that's landed in front of the committee, so if you need to address that, I'm happy to pause my testimony. Otherwise, I'm happy to wrap up. We're grateful to the committee, to the sponsors. We hope you share that value with us supporting successful reentry, and I encourage you to report this bill favorably. So thank you for the time.
Thank you for your testimony and not getting distracted. If you hear us screaming up here, it did look like a large wasp, so hopefully we're all safe up here. Are there any questions from the committee? You heard my question before, and maybe I'm making mountains out of molehills here, but I just feel like if somebody has the means to pay, they should pay right away. And I don't know what the right way to do that is. I don't want to put a burden on, individuals to have to go to court and prove that they're indigent necessarily. Obviously, a lot of them have already done that to get court-appointed counsel. Or do you put the burden on the prosecutor to try to make a motion to show that, hey, this person has the means? But if, we have white-collar crime, we have individuals that are very wealthy that commit violent offenses and go to prison, and quite frankly, I don't think they should get a 6-month time out where they don't have to pay. I completely agree with your testimony and others where if people don't have the means to pay, this is a great bill. But is there a way to carve that out without putting an additional burden on the courts or on individuals? You're smarter than I am, so maybe you can come up with that.
I won't claim that, but through Chair, thank you for the question. I'd be happy to spin my wheels on that and get back in touch with you in the committee. I do know from my past working as an attorney aiding folks through the reentry process that the very vast majority of these folks are indigent coming out of prison. Especially in the bill, I think we're looking at sentences of at least a year, obviously coming out of prison. And the very vast majority of people that I've met with personally and know through the data are coming out indigent. And so I think it would be difficult to set an additional step, again, determining, whether, that ability to pay for everyone coming out. I am entertaining the idea in my mind of what you said about, if there's evidence that a person has a ton of money, there could be something there, but the very, very vast majority of the folks coming out of our prisons are indigent and could really use the grace that's offered in this bill.
And I don't expect you to know this off the top of your head, but at least when I was practicing defense work, it seemed like the overwhelming amount of people were found indigent already. So is that a way to do it? If they're found indigent pre-sentence during their trial process? I don't know what that percentage is, if that's 50, 90, I don't know, but that could be an easy way where it's not an administrative nightmare because they're already found indigent. Would that be something that would work?
I'd be happy to take a look at it again.
I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah, no, it's okay. That's what I'm here for. Again, though, I'm thinking of what a year in prison can do to someone's finances, because when you lose a household income, other supports, hopefully folks have all of the supports when they get out of prison, but without, I think that passage of time really suggests that, that at least a year ago, determination of a person's, financial status could have changed and likely changed very significantly in that time.
Well, I appreciate it. See no further questions. Thank you once again.
Thank you.